Hello, I'm Magdalena and I'm a 22-year-old entrepreneur. And today I want to tell a story about my business and what were the mistakes I made that you eventually going your own entrepreneurship journey could avoid to end up in, a better situation that I am right now. The company that I own is called Rosklet. And basically, I make custom tea, custom blend, take existing tea and I add some fruits, some herbs, some spices, all those things that add together to create a little nice, consistent blend that I then sell by the bag. Basically, the company started kind of by accident, honestly. Like, the idea for the company originated from a talk I had with one of my good friends. We were at his house, he was making us some tea. As, we both really enjoy tea. We both really like artisanal and, custom premium tea, you could even say. And we're just talking about what kind of category was interesting to us, Basically, I had an idea that with his knowledge of tea and with my entrepreneurship skills, whatever you can call them, you could create something really unique. Problem I identified in myself actually was that sometimes I couldn't really bother to get myself to go and make myself those really high quality tea, mostly because it was just kind of cumbersome. Because it required me to have a special cup, a way to put the leaves so they wouldn't just suck to the bottom, a way to pull the leaves out, also a way to measure them so I knew exactly how much water and how much time I should keep brewing them. And it was all just kind of tedious, and sometimes when I was particularly depressed, I really wanted a hot cup of tea, but I just always found the process to be kind of overwhelming, Like, I had the tea in my kitchen, but it would be a several minute process. I also recognized that a lot of tea that were popular, especially here in Poland, is tea in bags. And I always wondered why specialty isn't that popular. And I kind of recognized that maybe it's because of the simplicity that bag tea offers, because you just have one bag, you just drop it into the cup, you push some water over it, you take it out, and you're done. Barely any hassle, no measuring, have any special equipment, you don't have to have like a drainer or anything. No, just you throw the bag into the cup and you're basically done. I always found that the tea that I saw in bags was very disappointing. Like, they just went on the quality of those fresh, good, premium leaves that I was drinking. I always thought that it was kind of weird that even the brands that were supposed to be premium, like they were selling on a higher price and they were offering, supposedly more premium black teas, they just couldn't compare to the taste of those fresh, custom mix, like specialty blends that I was drinking. And I thought that maybe there was an opportunity for a business. Like, I've identified a problem that I myself have, and I thought that with his knowledge about tea and everything else, I thought we could create something really interesting together. Well, we thought about it for a couple of days. I did some research, I took some notes, etc. And I talked to him, but he was kind of hesitant, and obviously I don't blame him, right? Because like, getting into a business, especially a food business, is, as I'll come to learn, incredibly difficult, time consuming and costly. So I kind of abandoned the idea. I let it rest for a couple months, but then that one particular night, I was just kind of restless, just sitting there thinking, well, if only there was something I could do. Because basically, I was finishing college, and I didn't really have any plan for the future, Like, I didn't know if I'm gonna continue studying. I didn't know if I wanted to, immediately get a job. I wasn't even sure if I'm gonna get a job because I studied creative writing. Always knew that it was, like, very risky, that it wasn't really a profession that you can just complete college and immediately find a good paying job, It's always competitive. It was always hard. And during the studies, I also discovered that I was kind of burning out from writing. Something that I deeply appreciate about the college experience was that they never hesitated to tell us that, hey, being a writer, having a career in writing is gonna be incredibly difficult. That you're gonna work long hours, you're gonna work on all sorts of projects that you might not even be interested in, and you're gonna earn pennies. And there's a very slim chance that you're gonna, quote unquote, make it in the industry. And all of that contributed to me thinking that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And a thought came about the tea business. I thought that maybe it could be something that I could do. And it took me a while. It took me a while of wondering, of thinking, of doing research before I decided that, you know what? I only live once. And, from that moment onwards, when I thought about it, from that very night, something shifted in me. I became maybe not obsessed. It wasn't like I worked like 12-hour days or anything. I worked a couple hours a day maybe, slowly formulating a plan. That niche I discovered, I actually did my research, and I really couldn't find any company that was public and that was able to, find in our local markets really doing this thing, which was putting really nice high quality blends of, like really expensive fruit, flowers, etc., other additives in a bag. Either you buy a bag that's gonna be kind of mediocre in quality, or you're gonna go to a specialty store that's gonna sell you loose tea at best. And also, there's also a barrier of entry when it comes to high quality tea and specialty, because, well, you had to go and look for the store, and when you enter the store, you kind of had to know what you wanted, right? Like, you kind of have to know, like, oh, I want green tea with maybe fruits, or maybe I want black tea with this and that. But when it came to black tea, a lot of us just kind of carried, like things we were already accustomed with. Like, for example, our grandparents always drank normal black tea from this brand, so I guess we're also gonna continue drinking the exact same tea because it was familiar, it was simple, and that always kind of bothered me, So I thought I found a genuine gap in the market. And when you hear about business advice, you always hear the same thing. You need to identify a problem and you need to find something that you genuinely want to use. If you're gonna run a business selling something that you genuinely don't believe in, that you wouldn't want to use yourself, if you're gonna, sell a tool that is useless to you, in a lot of cases, normal business advice will tell you against it, because you have to believe in your product and you have to be confident in its ability to solve an actual problem, because people don't just buy products. Well, sometimes they buy products because they are nice, but usually they buy products because they solve a problem in their life, and it's not always a problem that is immediately recognized. Like a lot of marketing for products really relies on making people aware of the problem they have. After I had the idea, I started research and I started developing the product. So innocently enough, I just bought a bunch of tea from suppliers that I really trusted. I ordered fruits, I ordered flowers, I ordered spices, herbs, and I just started mixing them, I thought, maybe green tea with strawberry is appealing and it's widely recognizable. It's a combo you see often. But then I started thinking deeper, like that in itself is good, tastes good, but it's a very obvious combination. Like everyone can make tea that is just strawberry with white tea. Maybe if we add just a little bit of cinnamon into it, it would create that nice sweetness, it would create that nice homey flavor. And I just started going over a bunch of ideas, like maybe this plus this could be a nice combo. And that process took me a couple of months, and finally, after a couple of months, I arrived at 80 distinct flavors that I thought were good enough to sell. At first I operated from my home, and this was actually the first mistake I made. Okay, like the first big mistake I've made was not doing enough research. Because my attitude towards research was mostly, I'm just gonna research as I go. I wouldn't go out and immediately start looking up how to operate a food business, because that was just too big and broad of a term for me. But instead I started researching things like, okay, how do I get ingredients? When I got the ingredients, I was looking for things like, how do I combine them to make nice tea? And step by step I slowly constructed those flavors, and only after those flavors were made, I was looking into, okay, how do I start selling them on a larger scale? That was where the problem arrived, because I discovered that working from home on your food business is incredibly complicated. You had to comply with a lot of rules that my setup at home just really wasn't compatible with. And it all came to me in this one visit to the local office that basically handles, like fat production and stuff. I visited it, brought photos of my setup, my description of what I actually do as a business, and I wasn't really sure what I'm gonna hear back. Like, I had a vague idea that, yeah, you can do it from home, but I didn't really research it that much. I went to the place to get that answer, like, okay, how do we actually do it from home? But what I heard back was honestly kind of devastating, because I heard that, well, my entire setup just couldn't work. I would have to rebuild my whole setup from scratch. And I was really unprepared to hear that. And that was the first moment where I really realized that what I was signing up for was much bigger than I initially thought. In a simple business, simple idea that, I could do something fun, I could spend my life creating nice little tea, and just being a huge enthusiast of a hobby I really loved. I realized that there are just simply much more steps to it, that the reality is much harder. After that realization, it took me some time, but eventually I started looking for a physical place. And actually, we are here right now, This is a small studio on rent. I wish I could start selling right now. but it's not that simple, unfortunately, because all those regulations that were applied to creating from home, those are 5 times more complicated when it comes to actually selling from a physical location. And obviously, I was prepared that there's gonna be a lot of bureaucracy. I was prepared that there's gonna be a lot of rules, but well, I really wasn't ready for the amount of them. And the biggest problem is finances. Definitely, it's always been finances. Basically, yeah, when I started this business, I was unemployed, right? And I mean, I still am. I was studying and I was getting like a small family pension that was able to cover, like my regular needs, like my rent, etc. And also, like cost of my treatment. But when I started getting into the business, I had to start borrowing money from family, and it was something I really wasn't comfortable with. I really don't like asking for help, especially financial, but I didn't really have another option. I had an option. I could just go to a normal job, I could just work, save up, put it on hold for a couple months, wait till I had, decent savings and then start working on the business. But I always made excuses for myself. Well, it's not gonna hurt to try, it's not gonna hurt to give it a shot and then maybe realize that, okay, I might need a job. I was always incredibly anxious about getting a job because, well, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining and whining, but, my mental health situation is pretty complicated, it's pretty rough, and I recognize that it's not an excuse for everything. And I realized that it's my own fault, I realized that it was my own laziness, and that I am able to admit it before myself that, yes, I made mistakes, and the fact that I'm anxious or like uncomfortable or like struggling, it isn't like a shield from mistakes. That just because I'm anxious doesn't mean that someone isn't anxious too and they have to go and work no matter if they want to or not. While I'm sitting here in a very privileged position and I'm complaining, right? Yeah, and the financial situation just kept getting worse, like I had some savings, but basically the studio, getting the furniture, getting everything arranged around here, it costed a lot more than I thought. And that was my second biggest mistake. I often hear advice that if you think something is gonna cost 5k, for example, prepare for it to cost 10k. And I did apply that, and like I did create like a realistic breakdown of costs, and it looked like 5 to 10k. And that was money that was manageable for me, it was money that I had. But then the reality came, and well, it wasn't as simple as just W estimations. It was closer to 4 or 5 times the estimation. So I thought the amount of money that I was going to be able to cover by my savings became so much larger. And with a business, especially something as unpredictable as, food business, when there's a lot of regulations, a lot of hidden rules, a lot of things you genuinely cannot research before you commit to it. And it's another thing, because I keep blaming myself for not doing enough research and not preparing enough. And yes, there is a point of that, right? Like there is a point, I could have researched so much more, but genuinely, I might be mistaken, by the way. Maybe you can share your own experience with running a business, but from my experience, there are just some things that you just genuinely cannot research and you cannot be prepared to. There are things like, I don't know, like I realized that, oh wow, like the actual lease of the property isn't gonna cover trash pickup. It was something that I had to arrange. And similarly, I realized that I needed way more furniture than I initially estimated. But so everything took a much longer time. I was assuming I could open in a month after acquiring the studio. It's already month 2.5 or something, and I still haven't opened because life happened. Like life happened. I was sick for a really long time, for like a week or two. I just genuinely couldn't leave my house, couldn't work or anything. Also, I had a car crash along the way. It wasn't serious or anything. Thankfully, nothing happened to me or the passenger or the other person. It was my fault. I completely admit it was my fault. I was stupid. I was reckless. I wasn't paying enough attention. I rear-ended someone. While thankfully, like physically nothing happened to me or my passenger, etc. The financial cost was incredible because, well, the car repair consumed so much of the budget I had for the business. And it wasn't something I could plan. I never thought that I'm gonna have to include additional couple thousand into the budget because, I'm gonna crash my car and it's gonna consume so much of the money, right? So you can research all you want, but unfortunately life is gonna go in the way, and my experience at least, it's gonna make things a little more complicated a lot of the times, Right now I'm sitting here in the studio that I own, that I have to pay rent. I have products, I have ingredients, I have everything I need to sell, but not everything. I still need a lot of money to really fit all the regulations. I need more furniture, I need more this and that and that. Financially, I'm just really struggling right now. Also, my mental health is just getting a lot worse, and it's kind of also really impacting my ability to work and to do stuff with the business. And the last couple days, especially, were particularly hard. It really hit me that one evening where the rent was coming by. I planned to ask my family for help, like I usually do. And obviously I had full intention to pay it off in the future, right? Like I'm not saying, oh, I'm just gonna take from my family and never return. No, I really want to pay it off when I'm gonna be able to. And I asked my family for help, and what I heard was, well, we don't really have enough money to help you. And that kind of terrified me because I never thought that was gonna be an issue. I never expected it. And well, it's very simple to just say, oh, it's because of the car accident. But it kind of is, like the car accident really consumed a lot of my time, my money, but also my family's money. And because of that, because of the money that was needed to be spent on the car, the amount of money that could be spent on the business was just heavily decreased, and also other things that I didn't expect that happened, some additional expenses, some medical issues, unrelated to my mental health. All that combined, the situation that I'm in, where I'm so close to opening and selling and making money, but I've never been less confident in the business. I'm sitting here and I really don't know what I'm gonna be doing. I don't know where the future is going. I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. I have no idea if this business will succeed. And I realized that all this time, all the months I spent on the business, I was incredibly anxious. I was depressed, I was struggling, I was stressed. But I kept telling myself that once I pass a certain milestone, those feelings are gonna pass, right? But I realized that even after the milestones came, the relief never came. Right? And I felt that especially with college, because college, despite my course being very easy, it was still really hard for me mentally and physically, kind of having to handle both the business and my bachelor's and also all the different stuff that was happening around the time. It was overwhelming. And something that really kept me going through that hard time was the thought that once college ends, it's gonna be so much easier. But now the college ended. I'm actually going to college back in October, by the way. So I'm not ending my experience with college, I'm going back to get a master's. But yeah, the college ended and I'm still just as, if not even more stressed than I was. And the same thing happened with the business, I was like, well, once I'm gonna open, it's gonna be easy. Once I'm gonna get the studio, it's gonna be easier. Once I'm gonna get the money for initial investment, it's gonna be easy. It never became easy. It never became easier. It always just got more and more stressful. And the last couple months, I've been kind of living on this kind of shaky conviction that the business might succeed. I did everything. I rented the studio, I paid so much money, I emptied my savings, all because of that shaky belief that it might work out. But now that I'm at genuinely one of my lowest points in my life, where the money is running dry, where my energy is at its lowest, and my health is failing, I'm sitting here and I'm no longer convinced. I no longer possess that hope that yes, the business can make it. Honestly, I don't know what to think about it. I don't really have many conclusions. So if you waited for big conclusions, like okay, do this, don't do that. I'm sorry, but this video doesn't really contain that. I just want to share my story, and I want all of you to listen to it and take away what you want from it. Because there are basically just endless things that you could take away from the story, right? Yeah, you could take away that, well, a business is hard, I'm not gonna do it. You can take away, oh, she underprepared, I'm gonna prepare more and I'm gonna succeed. You could think, well, she's losing hope in the business, that's why she's struggling. I'm never gonna lose hope in the business. You could take this video however you want. You could take this as an inspiration. You could take it as something that validated your doubts, your stress. You might relate to this video. You might think that, well, I wanted to start a business, but this video demotivated me. I'm not gonna offer that answer. I'm not gonna say, okay, don't start a business. I'm gonna say, okay, go start a business. What I'm gonna say is that I don't think I regret it. And regret is something that I thought very much about. You know, I don't want this entire video to just be me whining and complaining and being like, oh my god, my mental health. But genuinely, I had an attempt 2 years ago. But, since that time, I've kind of been living with this conviction that I'm just not strong enough to do it. And that was the thought that kind of kept me alive with all, from one of my hardest times in my entire life. That I tried and I kind of proven to myself that I really can't do it, I'm really not strong enough. So the only thing that left for me was to just, okay, I'm not strong enough. I guess I'm forced to, keep living. Then I'm gonna try to make the most of it, right? And I still live by this philosophy. Obviously, you could take it many ways. You could take it as hedonist, just prioritizing physical pleasure. I would personally describe myself as a nihilist or absurdist, or maybe even more of an existentialist. Mostly, I think that's what really fits me the best. I don't really think there's any real value in life. I don't really think there's any meaning to it. But I do think that while I'm stuck here, I want to find out what's gonna happen. Like, if I'm already stuck, let's just do something risky. Let's start that business. Let's do that thing. That I always wanted to do. Let's go for that dream that seems really stupid but could work. And this business was one of those dreams. It was one of those things when I said, well, I only live once, and well, I don't really care if I'm dead or alive. So let me actually try doing something that is incredibly risky. But maybe if it did succeed, I would be in a much better position than I was when I started. Now, sitting here after the gamble, well, it's not entirely doomed. I'm not saying I'm shutting down the business. I'm not saying, oh, it was a complete failure. I'm still gonna try, and there's a big possibility that maybe the business will survive. Maybe not. I don't know. Like, the hardest thing about this, me sitting here and talking, is that I don't know. I don't have the slightest idea of where it's gonna end up. Is it gonna be a success? Is it gonna be a failure? Is it gonna have to shut down in a week or maybe 5 years from now? I don't know. But basically sitting here feeling like the gamble didn't pay off, you'd think that I regret it. Well, I actually don't. I don't regret any single thing I did. And I recognize that I made mistakes. I recognize that if I went back to the past, I would probably wait. I would wait, probably get a job, try to gather more money, do more research, all of that. But I don't regret it. And my personal philosophy about regrets is basically pretty simple, right? It's just that, well, if something happened, then I guess it happened. And a lot of people kind of go by the thinking of, well, something happened for a reason. I don't think there is a reason why any of this happened. I just think that because it did happen, then, well, I just have to live with it. I also think that I genuinely sitting there back in December or whenever it was, when I first started thinking seriously about doing the business. If I told myself that, no, I don't want to do it, I don't want to risk it, I don't want to spend money, I don't want to get into it. If I told myself that, no, I'm not going to do it, I think I would regret that more than actually doing it. And something I carry with me for my whole life, like, I took a huge gamble by going to creative writing studies. It was one of the only things that I was interested with. It was one of the only things that I could see myself being good at. And obviously there was an option for me to go into something more stable, more safe. But I thought that if I didn't take that risk, I would regret it my whole life, right? And I still had that philosophy close to me, that I would much rather live, poor and unhappy after making risky decisions than to not make those risky decisions and have to live with the regret that, what if, I'm very young, I'm 22, obviously there's a big possibility that it's gonna change, like, I'm still young and idealistic and stupid, and inexperienced, and there is a big possibility that in 10 years I'm gonna look back at what I did and I'm gonna regret it. But for now, as I'm sitting here through one of the worst periods of my life, kind of because of the business and everything that relates to the business, I don't regret it. There's anything I want you to take away from that video is that perspective. I'm not telling you to do something risky and don't regret it. Obviously not. But what I am trying to say is that it might benefit you to think about it for a second. Think about what your life could look like if you took the safe path. because there are a lot of options in it. You could be happy. You could discover that you actually like the thing that you initially hated, but you will also discover that you really hate it and that you're gonna spend the rest of your life regretting that choice. There are infinite options. But I want you to think about it. If there is something that makes you think, I'm gonna regret it my whole life if I don't do it, then I can tell you to just go and do it. I'll be responsible. I actively encourage you to don't stop thinking about it. You don't have to do it immediately. You don't have to jump into it. You don't have to be like me and just abandon everything to go chase that dream. But I want you to hold it close, to don't forget about it, not to write it off completely. And that's basically all the advice I can give you right now, sitting here, because that is something that gives my life meaning. Chasing those experiences, chasing those things that makes me think, if I'm not gonna try it, I'm gonna regret it for the rest of my life. Even if it's gonna end up like this, even if I'm gonna end up anxious, depressed, in a really bad financial situation, I don't regret it. I absolutely don't fucking regret it. Yeah, so that's my story, Thank you for listening to it if you lasted the whole video. Well, I can't say anything more than, well, thank you. I really hope you share your story in the comments though, I'm very much looking forward to discussing it with some of you guys, basically. I'm not gonna tell you to subscribe because it's kinda dumb, like here I am, pouring my heart out, just kinda talking about something that I really shouldn't talk about on the internet, some really intimate things, and here I am begging for subscribers at the end of it. That would just be kind of weird. I'm not gonna ask you to subscribe, but I'm gonna ask you to think about it. Pause the video, take a second of your day, and just think about it. Okay, that was it. Thank you. It was Magdalena from Business Tea. I hope to see you again in the next video. Thank you.